Hey everyone, I'm Zach from the Cutting Board. Today, we're going to make this wine bottle accessory.
All I need is you, baby, baby.
Now for a project like this, the design you choose and the material you use really have no limitations. I'm using 5 different woods for my build, some that I already had as scraps and some that I purchased. In all, it was about $19 in materials that would yield me 4 to 5 of these wine holders. And I didn't have a set design in mind either, nor did I really have specific cuts I wanted to make. The only real parameter I set for myself was that the maple would be about half of the overall material to help contrast the darker woods that I had on hand, and that the strips I ripped wouldn't be wider than 2 inches or less than a 1/4 inch wide. Once I made my cuts, I mixed it up to whatever design I felt worked best. Take your time in the glue up. You can use a caul if you want to keep things flat. I personally prefer to work on top of a flat surface with packing tape. It keeps things flat and your glue up won't stick to it as it cures. Give it at least 12 hours before running it through a planer. And once it dries, you can flatten it out in whatever way you have available. I have a planer, but a cheap router sled or a belt sander would work too. It just might take a little bit more time. Something to consider here is that if you don't have a planer or a table saw, you can build the exact same project with just a single piece of wood. It just won't have as much variety in the color, but it will be much cheaper and it will make the project more accessible to you. I squared up one side of the blank and cut away a bit of the planer snipe, and then I ripped it into increments of 4.5 inches, and I ended up with 4 blanks from this material. Next was drilling. I measured out and marked up the areas where I'd be cutting holes for the wine glasses and the bottle. Then, using 2 different Forstner bits, I clamped down and drilled things out. A drill press would obviously make things quicker here, but using a regular drill like I am works just as well. It just takes a bit longer. I then cut lines to each wine glass hole, and I used my miter saw for this, but of course a jigsaw or a bandsaw would work for this also, but for me, using a miter saw helped me make the cleanest cuts. Now again, with no set design for these, you can really make them into any shape you want. I kept it simple and chose to make 2 different ones, and then used various things I had lying around like scrap edge banding or the roundness of a piece of tape to make stenciled lines. Then I cut things out on my bandsaw, and my bandsaw is awful, so using a disc sander would probably have actually been more efficient. So speaking of, make sure you change your sanding discs and belts before they get to this disgusting state. It makes such a difference. I mean, look how gross this thing is. It really didn't sand at all and it just started burning the wood. But once I did, I cleaned everything up on the disc sander, and a little tip is the further out you move on the disc, the more aggressive it will take down the edges. And belt sanders work great for really refining the entire outside border. Now I wanted to break the edges on these, so I'm using my palm router and a roundover bit for this. And I'm not very good with a router, so I went really slow and I got some great practice in during this step. Once that was done, I did another round of final sanding up to 220 grit, including wet sanding, and it took down any burn marks and it raised the grain to properly smooth things over. And I was really excited for the mineral oil on this build, knowing how many different types of wood I was using. And I wasn't let down by how great everything popped once I got to this stage. And after it cured, I was done. And I really like how scalable this project is based on what tools you might have access to and how much you can vary up the design and the wood within it. These are really great gifts with the holidays coming up, and it can be batched out really quickly once you get the process down. So thank you again to everyone who watched this video. Make sure you subscribe and check out some of the other projects that I've worked on that I'm going to link right here. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.